terms of getting into properties to do this drilling. That is along a roadway, and we're looking at a lot of our work as appropriate to be done along the roadways because it's easy access for us. We don't have to go into people's backyards if we don't have to. We're trying to avoid creating, if we have to, we'll talk with the property owners. But for right now, staying within those right-of-ways where we can and where it makes sense is what the approach is.
Okay, I've monopolized the time. One last question, and that is, a hydrogeologic study of this magnitude will probably take a year or more. Are you going to release some interim results as you find more hot spots, more areas of concern?
I would imagine that as we get information that it would be made public. I mean, we're not trying to keep anything to ourselves. We've been releasing information all along as we've been doing this. So,
and I commend you for that.
Every day up until Friday, we've had a 10 o'clock conference call with the DEQ, State Health Department, Local Health Department, City of Parchment, Cooper Township. Who am I missing? EOC. And we've gone to Tuesday, Thursday this week, and as they get, and if we have more information that needs to extend that, we will. Mark?
While you're standing up there, could you point out where the agricultural wells were tested at on your map? The three that you speak of?
Irrigation well?
Irrigation wells?
One was the Parchment High School, I know that.
Right.
They have an irrigation well at the high school. One was Russell Farm, and I'm not sure of the third one.
I don't think it's.
So we haven't expanded past Spring Brook because there's some large agricultural wells just on the other side of Spring Brook, and I was wondering. Thank you.
They're working towards that area, yes, with what they find out with their new wells, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to add one more comment subsequent to Professor Hampton's questions. And the dotted line as we have it drawn now follows Solvable and Fair, and we collected several more samples from residential wells last week along Solvable and a couple along Fair. We're expecting those results any day. If we get if we get information back that says we need to move the line out, then we'll make that decision based on that information.
Anyone else like to address our panel this evening? Yes?
Lori Garrison, I was on 5580 Plato. I'm kind of in the extended and getting bottled water. We have been told to not drink our water, that our wells weren't good. Then they took us off the list. Now we're back on the list. Then they took us off again the last 2 days of the bottled water. Now we got a letter that we are back on. Nobody's testing in our area. I guess I don't understand how you can draw the line and tell us where our water is not okay, but that nobody's testing. I mean, if you did one well, if I've got 5 neighbors that our wells are all at 105 feet, why not come test one of those wells?
So you're outside of this area,
Yeah,
but within that extended,
right above your finger.
okay, so out in that area approximately. So the approach that we're taking right now is with the information that we have for that area, we've drawn this boundary to do further studies with the hydrogeologic study. The health department is providing bottled water at this time. If we put a well in that area and find that there is PFAS in the groundwater that's of concern, then that area would extend beyond where it is now. And depending on where you're located with that expanded area, the health department's ready to provide the filter if needed.
So how are they going to deem that our wells are good just from the study?
So we will get information about the extent of the groundwater impact. So if we put our wells in and get information that says there is no contamination with those wells, And this is not just one well sitting at the water table. This is looking at several wells going through the aquifer. If we have a good amount of information from those wells that says the contamination is not out in this area, then we will be comfortable with saying the PFAS is not in the groundwater in this area.
And how will they notify us?
Of that, either situation, I mean, we'll be doing updates, kind of like what we're doing right now, but in other ways with press releases that are kind of giving information about the study as it's going forward, what those results are telling us. So we're trying to cover as many ways of communicating this as possible. This is one, the media releases are another, town hall would be another.
So, you received a letter from us stating that you're eligible for the Gordon bottled water. We're going to, either way, when DEQ is done with their hydrogeo study, we're going to notify those residents of the results of that. So, certainly press release can be part of that, but we want to go direct with you with a mail-in, and we're going to let you know. And certainly, you can call our office through this as well. So, if you have any questions, I certainly want you to call, and we'll give you the information as we know it, certainly.
So it'll be mailing then? It'll be mailed out to us then?
It's gonna, yeah, we're gonna mail you directly with the results. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to point out for you, and for everyone, when we put these test wells in, it's not gonna be just a one-time sample event. Okay, like if we put the wells in and they come back out good, which gives us that comfort of saying that we think this area on the side of the line is not impacted, we're gonna go out there and we're gonna sample every quarter for at least a year, maybe longer. Okay, so we're not gonna base it just on one event. We'll continue to monitor those wells so that we have information going forward to continue to build that confidence.
Why not just test the wells that are already there? Why not test her well?
Because, as I think David alluded to earlier, okay, we test residential wells in order to make sure that, to determine whether or not there's an impact that requires a response. And they're not good for conducting a hydrogeologic study, okay? And based on all the well results that we've gotten back thus far, and again, we're still expecting some results along here, and also with what we understand about the regional hydrogeology, because this area is quite a bit higher in elevation than the Kalamazoo River Valley, it would be extremely unusual for the groundwater to be flowing any other way than towards the river at this point. Okay, and so right now we feel that this is a boundary area where we feel that there shouldn't be any impacted wells above the 70 total PFO on PFAS. But because we don't know, as Bert Johnson alluded to earlier, that's why we're providing bottled water in that expanded area.
Dave?
So just to chime in, because you provided a really good explanation of the hydrogeology. Again, Mike's choreographed with the health department. I'm not a geologist. I'm not the experts that you see staying over there. But from the public health standpoint, what I've learned from them is that it's a much better investment to put in one of these vertical monitoring wells that get you scientific data, and it gives it to you over the year, and it gives you at depth. So it's not, it will tell you, well, how deep is it down and how does it change over time? And then you take everything Dave just said about how things, water moves and all that, he'll be able to know that and bring you an actual science-based statement to everybody outside that purple dotted line about what's going on with their water relative to what's going on inside that purple dotted line area. Why am I saying all that? Because, yeah, I mean, we could say, hey, go test everybody's residential well. And then we have these conversations. Well, what does that tell me? How long is it good for? Is it good for a week? Is it good for 3 weeks? Month? Don't know. Why don't you know? Because it's not a hydrogeology study. You need a whole lot more information than just the concentration. You need to know how the water moves around and all the things Dave just said. So we really prefer when they can go, when DEQ can do this sort of hydrogeology work, it actually provides a much more health protective answer than coming off and testing your well once and saying, well, it looks good today. But what can I tell about the future? When they get done, we're going to have a lot more knowledge. So anyway.
It'd make her feel a lot better though, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you rather know today?
You wanna let your kids come drink my water?
So out in that area.
Tomorrow again, after, it could be good
I mean,
today.
so, I mean, I think it's a fair question, and we're happy to talk about it. I mean, we've always handled one-off requests and those sort of discussions where people are highly concerned and look at it and say, look, I really don't feel comfortable, even though, you know, all the red dots are down in here, and Dave can explain how, you know, things start to kind of go uphill and water doesn't really run uphill, it goes down, so it's going to be really flowing towards the river. But we really understand. I mean, it's a totally legitimate concern. Like, hey, I don't really trust all that stuff, and I'm out here and I'm concerned about my kids. Happy to take that off, talk with Vern and I, and we can talk about that and see what we can do, okay? So I think that's perfectly fine. We're just, you know, as us public health and science folks, you know, we're just trying to use the resources and answer everybody's question in the most valid, defensible way.
Okay. Now,
Hang on just a second. Got somebody else with a hand up back. Your name and address, please.
Hi, Heather Hunter, and I'm at 2936 McKinley Street. I'm curious, on this map, we've been told that the water is running towards the river, downhill, to the northwest. However, you have all these contaminated wells showing up to the east of these suspected sites. Can you explain to me why, if you didn't know for sure what the geology of the groundwater really was and where the contamination was really going, and you're just now getting ready to start, why you've been telling all of us this all along, instead of just saying we're not exactly sure where it's at? Because that leaves validity to her question about why her well was tested, even though water is not supposed to go uphill. You can't guarantee, according to your map and where the things are actually showing up, that you know the actual flow of water. And how long before you know when you can connect those of us who are not on the city water line, when we will have the city water line going past our homes so that we can connect, and who exactly is going to pay for that? Because we did not ask for this
Absolutely.
added expense.
I think I can take a stab at answering your question a little bit. And when you look at where those red dots are, you're looking at a very, very flat area. And when those wells at Parchment City were drawing out of the aquifer, that was pulling pretty much everything towards their well. And being that when you are looking at about Riverview Drive going west to the river, that's pretty flat down there. That is an area where then the aquifer can spread out, especially when you're drawing 3 large wells that are pulling city water for a municipal system out, stops. Things stop sucking out of that. And in that flat area, that's what you're noticing all those red dots that are east of that area.
So you're saying that just from the point of time in July, when you turn those well pumps off, that contamination flowed that direction that fast?
No, it's been doing that. Being a flat aquifer like that, the water moves back and forth through that all the time. And, you know, depending upon whether it was the paper mill landfill or the paper mill itself that causes that aquifer moves back and forth, but ultimately goes to the river. And as you start upgrading it, if you know, like if you go up Brackett Street towards there's quite a elevation change there when you get up there. That's where that line is, where they have that, where that up gradient is, and then the buffer line outside of that with the water. But everything that they're doing is definitely science-based, and I'm concerned for everyone too. I don't live that far out of the area myself, and
So, Jeff, if I may add.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important to focus on what do we know and what don't we know. And the hydrogeological study is going to help us learn and fill in the gaps of what we don't know. What we do know is that Crown Vantage area has a high strength PFAS source, and I mean it is high. And so we know that that is a source of PFAS. We know that the Kalamazoo River, the direction of flow is towards the Kalamazoo River, but seasonally, and for those of you that have been in this area a long time, we know that that river gives and it takes seasonally. That direction of flow can actually shift back and forth. And the hydrogeological study is actually going to be able to measure that over time. The professor is right, it's going to take some time to get that data so that we're going through different seasons to find out direction of flow, water table, the height of it, the geology. Take a look at all of that because there's gaps in what we don't know. And so the filters, the bottled water are put in place until we find out the answers that we so desperately need to give you guys. I mean, you deserve it. We need you as public health officials. Find those answers and get those to you. We just don't know at this point all of the answers to your question. So the testing, I think DEQ did a really good job of the testing to find out where is this? Because a sample is one point in time to say, hey, PFAS was found in a well, residential well, in these different areas. The hydrogeological study is going to answer a whole lot of questions of, yes, Corey is right, the depths of the water table, but the direction of flow seasonally in this very sensitive area, especially the west of that Riverview, we're going to be able to answer a lot of those questions.
Okay, so then we do not know what the permanent solution will be for those of us who are not currently on water line until the study is done? Or at what point in time do you know what that permanent solution is going to be for us?
So right now, we're working a couple different options. In the dashed area that you see, municipal water is the answer that we're looking at, and
It's not everywhere in that dashed area.
right, and to extend city water is important. So yes, east or west of Riverview, there's some water there. I know Travis doesn't have it, but there's water to hook up to. But east of Riverview, that would have to be extended, and north of G Avenue. And so we're working on that. We're working on a plan to get that done. Yep.
Our next presentation will also kind of help you out a little bit about, I've been to Lansing, and also going to be working with our senator and our local officials to see, but you'll hear a little bit more, and then I'll expound on that in a bit. Now, you young ladies, one in the back that was first. John?
John Scott, 5471 Riverview. My question is, are we ever going to be put back on Parchment Water, or are we staying on Kalamazoo permanent?
That's unknown. They have a year agreement at this point, and probably Parchment Water. And I know we have a commissioner here this evening. I know that's hot on their list. They've got a committee that is actually assembled, and they're going to be meeting here within the next week. And when we get more information, we can let everyone know.
And the third well tested, agricultural well, was Jack well, Warren well.
Oh, very good. Young lady here first.
I'm Linda Coolidge. I live at 3544 Tibet Avenue. We were told that the water doesn't travel up the hill, but I'm a little bit confused because on the 5500 block of Mount Olivet, around the corner from us, there was a well that tested high. Is that an aberration, or did somebody not tell the water's not supposed to run uphill? I mean, I'm concerned because I'm right around the corner.
Yeah, so Dave, you want to take that?
So when we talk about water not running uphill, we're talking hydrogeology in a sense. So we're looking at groundwater flow direction generally in this area, and I didn't point them out before, but the blue arrows, groundwater flow is generally towards the river. So when we say it doesn't run uphill, as a geologist, I'm kind of thinking in 3 dimensions and talking about the water below. And the groundwater is generally flowing from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. And so when you see contamination move into areas that you might think are higher from a topographic elevation, that may not necessarily be true from a hydrogeologic perspective. So the groundwater, as Jeff was talking about before, in the valley area, and maybe even moving out away from that a little bit, that groundwater surface may not be tilted like you may think the topography. It may be a little bit more steady. That's part of what this hydrogeologic study is going to help us understand better. So you can potentially get an area that's topographically higher and still see some sort of movement of the contamination into that area.
Okay, we're in the green area, wouldn't that move us closer to the red area though? Because it's like 2 blocks.
You're inside the green dash line, ma'am?
Yes,
So you're on bottled water right
we
now?
are.
Right, and that's, again, as we've talked about before, the reason that bottled water is being provided in this area is to give you water supply that you're not concerned about while we conduct the investigation.
Well, I'm still concerned because we're all bathing in this water. We're all doing our dishes in this water.
So I can add,
question.
yeah, so I'd like to add, because that raises a really good point. So what we do know about these chemicals is that they do not do a good job of being absorbed through our skin. So there is data out there and some studies that have shown very clearly that these chemicals and chemicals like them are served by our skin barrier, so we can keep them out from our skin. Our skin does a good job of keeping them out, just like our skin does a good job of keeping out a lot of things. And our primary concern is through consumption, so drinking it, because our stomach and our oral consumption route is not a good way to keep these chemicals out of our body. It can't be absorbed that way, as opposed to a very poor job in the skin. So that is why the recommendation is that you shouldn't be overly concerned. You shouldn't be concerned about bathing or washing your clothes or your dishes or anything like that. But thank you for bringing that up.
Mr. Markham?
How many monitoring wells are you putting in?
Between 15 and 20.
I was thinking, we're still developing how many are gonna go in, because again, some of it's gonna depend on access and where we can get into, but we're looking at about 20 of them around the study area.
Marcia Stafford, 2669 Summerdale. And of course, my well was tested and I now have a filter, thank goodness. But I'm wondering, in your results from your well testing, has it made a difference how deep the wells are? I mean, like mine's 91, some are 130, some, has it made a difference in the results that you are finding?
So one of the things to keep in mind when you're thinking about well depths, and there isn't a clear distinction between the well depths in terms of where they are in the aquifer at this point. But somebody that has, say, a 50-foot well that may be down in the valley area versus somebody that has a 150-foot well, they may be sitting in the same spot when you adjust for that elevation difference. So we have to take into consideration where that well is actually screened within the aquifer. And we haven't really seen that when you do that, that there's a real obvious pattern for where this is showing up.
Jeff, I'm sorry, but can they come to the mic? We've got this blower going, we can't hear you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Actually, if you want to pull that door closed, I have the key, that's not a problem, if that helps.
Oh, it's in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Shirley. Or Marilyn. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I actually have several questions. My name is Amber Adams-Paul, I'm from Parchment. I came out to this meeting because we actually have not been able to get another town hall in Parchment with you guys at it. So my first question is actually about the Cooper residents that have private wells. You had told us at the beginning of this meeting that there are 53 wells, I'm understanding, that still have not been tested, that are at private homes, and only 4 of those are people that have refused testing. I was just wondering, like, for specific clarity reasons, are those wells going to be tested that were originally on that list, and when will that be scheduled?
If they were canvassed, then we're waiting for, I mean, yes, but the problem is getting contact.
Okay,
So
they
what happened?
will be tested when those residents respond.
Yeah, so what we did was when we went to the houses, if nobody was there, we would leave a door hanger, had a number on there for them to call to asked to set up an appointment basically because they obviously weren't available during the time that we were there. So we can set up appointments with people to come back and do that testing.
Okay. My next question is kind of directed specifically at you. I've called you several times. At one point, it took me 6 days to get to leave a voicemail for you because your voicemail box is regularly full. So I'm requesting that you empty that out regularly, and that you specifically, that you call me back instead of one of your coworkers.
No, I absolutely, and I'm not trying to make an excuse. It's been overwhelming trying to get that thing to not be full, and I'd be happy to talk with you after this meeting.
I mean, I understand that, but at every single one of these meetings that all of us have taken time out of our schedules to come to, we've been told that we will be able to reach you when we call. And I've been calling for a month to all of you, and the response has been concerning. So whatever is necessary to make it possible for us citizens to reach the people that are in charge of dealing with our water crisis, I need to see that happen.
Understood.
My other question is directed at the health department specifically. I keep hearing and have been hearing for like 6 weeks now that the concern is to make sure that we all have clean drinking water. I think a lot of us have acute health concerns, and I don't feel like those have been addressed at all. For the first month when we were getting bottled water in Parchment, we were told that the only thing that was on the table at that point was making sure that we got clean drinking water, and that as soon as the water problem was solved, then we could start talking about health and environmental effects, and I still haven't seen that happen despite weeks of having had water coming through my pipes. So I want to know, I would like some specific answers in terms of environmental questions regarding my garden, which I have not gotten from anyone yet. We were told we couldn't eat our produce. I think that affects a lot of people in this room and in this community. So I literally lost hundreds of dollars worth of produce in my yard. I was losing more hundreds of dollars in canned goods, and no one has answered my question about whether or not it's safe for me to plant next year. So I need an answer to that from someone. I think everybody else would probably know that, and I want to know when you guys are going to start being concerned with the health effects for the poisoned water we've already consumed.
Being Amber, I think we've talked on the phone, so it's very nice to put a name to this. I'm Dr. Will Middleton, Medical Director for Kalamazoo County. Thank you for your concern. It's justified concern about potential health effects of our community members, where we live, where we work. So I think that concern is justified. With respect to specific health concerns, we can talk with our state health department partners. We've begun to have those conversations, to ask those questions about what could the potential health concerns be. And it's a very complicated question to ask, but we are collaborating with our state health partners as well as our national health partners to begin to ask those questions. The questions we need to ask to really ask those questions. And that's a long-term process. There's a lot of specifics that go into that, but we've begun to take those steps moving forward. I think Corey can kind of address that through more of the collaboration we've been having.
Yeah, again, Corey Bachesa, nice to meet you. So the logistics of it, let's just talk, what process are we following? The process we're following is laid out by the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry on the CDC. And it starts with, so the first thing, you never have all the information you'd like. But the first thing I observe is you have two sets of data here. You have your municipal water data. Were you on municipal or are you on private?
Municipal water.
Okay, so the municipal water, had the higher levels and had levels that were not quite as that we see now. You can't go back in time. So let's just go with municipal. What do we know about municipal water? And this is very early on. On municipal water, we knew that what was coming out was somewhere in the hundreds to maybe as high as 2,000. That's the analytical data that we have. We also know that the likely source, or however we want to phrase it, is Crown Vantage. And when you check the groundwater over there, it's much, much higher. But we really don't know, to what extent and when these two things came together and at what concentrations. Okay, that group is the one we're having these conversations, as Dr. Nelson said, with ATSDR about their process. And their process, it starts with, okay, did you have a source or people drinking it? Check, yes. Now the question is, how long and how do we go through and decide, what's the next step? And the next step is called an exposure assessment, okay? Now, I'm gonna give you two terms, and they're really critical to understand the difference between them. One is exposure assessment, the other is called health study. Everybody would like to see the answers coming out of the health study, because that's the questions you're asking, right? What, I got exposed, what did it do to me, what did it do to kids, what did it do to my neighbor, all of that. You don't go to a health study until you know how much exposure people had and whether you can convince the folks who are going to fund it to go to the health study, okay? So it's not about the money, but you're not going to be able to do a health study, which the ones I've seen run also very simply. The federal government has given ATSDR to do a national multi-site health study, $20 million, okay? $20 million, and that's probably a low end to what a health study costs. Can folks in this area get into that health study? You have to go through an exposure assessment to be considered. So what we're talking with ATSDR about is an exposure assessment. What's an exposure assessment? It does two things. Basically, we want a blood sample from a representative number of people on the municipal water system. It's not about testing everybody, and it's not about your personal health. It's unfortunate. These exposure assessments aren't going to benefit the people who participate so much as the people who would participate are doing a service to their fellow citizens. Okay? They're going to represent the community. They're going to give a blood sample. They would fill out a survey. Okay? And then that would be able to be used by ATSDR when they're doing their health study. Who are they going to look to in the nation to include in their health study to make that choice, to be able to invite people in, to answer the basic question. How much do people get exposed here? That's question one, because the chemical has to get in the body and stay for a long time. There aren't really acute effects from it. It's really all about being exposed to it for a long period of time. And it's complicated because CDC has already shown that we all carry around some of these chemicals in our body. Right now, today, I have it. They've tested 10,000 or more people across the United States. It's a fact. And that it doesn't cause acute effects, but it's like it may contribute to chronic diseases that have many other causes. Figuring something like that out, you got to find a bunch of folks who did have too much exposure and then carefully follow them going forward. That's something that takes a large agency like ATSDR. What we're talking about is exposure assessment. Can we set up an exposure assessment, get volunteers in a scientific way that allows access? Okay, so I said a lot, but that's I want to be clear. Exposure assessment, health study, and we are meeting again this month to then come up with a timeline for how to create one of these. So, next step in the process, we are doing one of these in Kent County. To write a protocol, if you're going to go and ask somebody to get blood, you need a well-written, scientifically reviewed protocol